Amazing. Okay, that's us live. So good afternoon, everyone. As you're logging in now, I'll just go through a quick introduction, just as I see the numbers are climbing up there. So welcome to this month's Public Service Innovation Network event, where we're going to explore the innovation professional in Ireland with 4 of our guests from the Innovate Ireland Network. The Innovate Ireland Network is an all-Ireland professional innovation network. Innovate Ireland aims to be a community of practitioners, advocates, and explorers of innovation. I won't give any more away, as I know Charlie will be explaining this in a lot more detail coming up soon. Today, we hope to explore what it might mean to be an innovation professional in Ireland. Many of you out there have had innovation added to your roles recently and might be thinking, what's this all about and how do I make an impact? So today, we hope to look at how might that work in practice or in your own organization. What does success as an innovation professional look like? And are there proven pathways or models out there? My guests today are Charlie Tuxworth, Eileen Deasy, Alan Doherty, and Owen Flavin, and they're going to show us some real examples. So with that context in mind, I'll now hand you over to our first speaker, Charlie, who has been delivering innovation and creative solutions into SMEs and enterprise for the last 25 years. Over to you, Charlie.
Okay, thank you very much, Vinny. And on behalf of the 4 of us, thanks for your kind invitation to talk to your network today. We're absolutely delighted to be here and to have the opportunity. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Tuxworth, and I am one of the founders of Innovate Ireland, but that isn't my day job. My day job is to enable innovation within established organizations. And I help organizations to ensure that the innovation activities that they use are aligned to and deliver against their overall corporate vision and objectives. I build individual and teams' capability and confidence, if you like, to innovate, and I mentor a range of creativity and collaboration techniques as well. That wasn't really the career path that I expected to be on when I set out. And for many years, I ran the enterprise software team in what was the largest indigenous IT company in Belfast at the time, creating bespoke and one-off enterprise solutions, mainly into the public sector. Our approach to projects was expensive and it was slow, but that didn't overly concern us at the time because we were too busy delivering large-scale IT projects into our chosen Northern Irish markets. Basically, we were too busy coming down the stairs, bump, 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 to think of any other way of doing it. But when we'd pretty much taken our home market as far as we could, we realized that our business model just wasn't going to work when we looked elsewhere. We were too small to have any level of credibility if we went to London, and our delivery model just wasn't going to scale. So my responsibility was to stop bumping down the stairs for a moment and actually to think of another way. And over time, we did do just that. We created new tools, new methods, new ways of working that actually allowed us to move away from the bespoke one-off project model and break into the GB market with great success. Basically, we innovated our business and we innovated our delivery models, but this was around the early 2000s, so we didn't call it that at the time. It was probably called business process reengineering or something like that. But with the benefit of hindsight, it was definitely innovation. We were bought by a UK business services PLC a few years after that, and in 2013, I found myself being appointed as Director of Innovation across the group of around 4,500 people. I was given a very short brief. Literally, this is it: make our solutions more innovative and create new products and services. And it was a brilliant opportunity for me. It was a really exciting opportunity. But there was no steer as to what I was expected to deliver, how I was supposed to go about it, or even what the executive team actually meant when they used the word innovation. So, like many people do, I started out with ideation, and I learned to use a wide range of techniques, from online collaboration, where we'd get 300 or 400 people solving a problem together, creativity techniques, design thinking, horizon scanning, so looking out for new technologies and ways of working that we could exploit, and also joining up the dots, so kind of getting bits of the business to work together and talk together when they'd never done so in the past. And we had a huge amount of success, but I also got a lot of scars on my back and learned some pretty hard lessons, you know, with things not working just as we'd expected or hoped them to do.
Charlie,
so the first lesson, yeah.
Do you mind? Sorry, just speaking of things that aren't working as well as they should, just as we went live, it managed to knock off your slides, so they just aren't presenting at the minute.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm only after noticing that now.
Okay, you haven't missed much.
Fashion.
There we go.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay. Now you may understand what I was talking about when I was talking about bump, bump, bump down the stairs. Up until that point, it would have made no sense at all to you. So anyway, so yeah, we used a number of ideation techniques and a lot of success with them, but also kind of I learned a lot of hard lessons. The first lesson really was that ideation is a fantastic place to start with any innovation program, because it can generate a real sense of excitement across an organization. And it can produce some quick wins that really demonstrate the value of thinking differently. But it was becoming obvious that all of this ideation was not building a culture of innovation. We weren't seeing change become a core mindset or transformative thinking being encouraged in any way, shape, or form. So the second big lesson that we learned was that strategic alignment and skills development are absolutely critical for any organization that wants a long-term commitment to innovation. So we spent time building awareness, building skills across the company, and took some time to make sure that all of these innovation tactics that we were using were actually supported and impacting the core business strategy. When I was doing this role, I was spending more and more time in Dublin, looking at fintech startups, cybersecurity companies, and a variety of other potential partners. So in between the meetings, I took the opportunity to meet up for a coffee and a chat with other people who purely based on their LinkedIn profiles looked like they had some form of innovation role. And a common thread coming from all these conversations that we were all really keen to talk about what we did, to share the lessons that we'd learned, and to ask all those all-important stupid questions. I tried this technique, I just couldn't get it to work. What on earth am I doing wrong? And I left those meetings on a real high, with a real buzz, and not just because of too much caffeine. And I also felt that I'd been going through some kind of therapy session, if you like, because I realized that in terms of what I was doing, in terms of leading innovation, it wasn't just me. I wasn't alone in this. There were actually other people out there that I could talk to and ask for help, guidance, and advice. And Alan, who you'll hear from shortly, and I had a number of meetings, and we talked many times about getting a larger group together. And those discussions were the seed of an idea that would eventually grow and develop to become Innovate Ireland. And the idea was to get together in a venue. We were thinking initially Dublin and Belfast, to share stories, share experiences, but also to encourage networking in the bar afterwards, if you like, to have those snug conversations that would emulate the coffee shop meetings. Then, of course, COVID happened, and that really was the end of that, we thought. But we kept thinking, well, it's got to be possible somehow. We must be able to do this. And imagine if we could create some form of support network for people working in innovation that could emulate those coffee shop meetings, but do all of this online. So we got a group of like-minded individuals together, and last summer we set up and launched Innovate Ireland purely through LinkedIn. We created a State of the Nation survey, if you like, and we produced a report that outlined the innovation landscape that spanned the whole island of Ireland. Since then, we've rapidly grown to nearly 230 members from across 22 counties. And we've also got members from Hong Kong, Costa Rica, and Brazil, who are looking to emulate what we're doing with Innovate Ireland in their own geographies, and then work alongside us and potentially in partnership with us moving forward. We've got members from a really wide range of sectors. The results here, I think, are probably about the first 140 survey responses we gathered. So the profile may have changed a little bit, but the top 5 are no great surprise. We've got IT, we've got consultancy, financial services, academia, and of course, public sector. Around 25% of the members work in enterprises with over 1,000 people in them. And most of those are providing a wide range of products and services, and many are operating within heavily siloed structures. Our members also come from a wide range of companies, including some really big brands and kind of household names. But it's important to note that our members aren't representing their company when they engage with Innovate Ireland. But what they discover when they're on Innovate Ireland is that it can certainly be applied back when they get to back to work, back to the day job. So Innovate Ireland doesn't represent a specific cluster or business sector. It's a really diverse group of people from a wide range of backgrounds, operating at all levels within the organization, and with very, very different levels of innovation experience. Some of the members are new to role. Some are actively working to make innovation a profession rather than a job title. And others have been doing this stuff for years and are now writing ISO standards on the topic, quite literally defining what good looks like when it comes to innovation. And that diversity is what makes Innovate Ireland so interesting and useful for anybody that is practicing, promoting, or simply dipping their toe into this for the first time. We're a non-commercial organization, which makes it really easy for people to get involved. And we run events almost every Friday so that we can get at least some of the members together. And each month we have a guest expert speaker who will talk at one of our Speakers Corner events. We have a meetup where one of the members will share their stories, their experiences, or a new technique or challenge that they've been facing. We have Ask Me Anything sessions where a small panel of willing volunteers, if we can put it that way, will face questions around a topic relating to some aspect of innovation. And all they have to do is promise that there will be no hot air, no waffle. If they don't know the answer, that's absolutely fine. We can take it offline. And then between those events, we've got informal coffee stops where anybody available and that's around at the time can drop in to shoot the breeze, ask a question, talk about an innovation or a non-innovation related subject. So if that sounds interesting and useful to you, then please take a look at our website to find out more, innovateireland.net. And that will point you to some of our events, to our LinkedIn group, to our YouTube channel, where you can find recordings of some of the previous events, or contact me on LinkedIn if you want to find out more before you kind of commit to joining us. So that's me. I'd now like to hand over to Aileen, who's going to share with you some of the amazing innovation work that she's been delivering in the public sector over the last few years. So Aileen, over to you.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks everybody. So my name is Aileen, and I've spent the last 10 years of my career in Bordish Gavara, and I've just recently changed role where I'm now working for Fáilte Ireland. My role in BIM was Innovation Lead, and my role currently is Enterprise Manager within Fáilte Ireland. So today I would just like to tell my story of innovation, which really has evolved from, ground zero right up to, doing a master's and finishing a master's in innovation last year. So a little bit about me, and seeing as I am in the Fáilte Ireland seat at the moment, and you can see from my picture there, the Wild Atlantic Way. When you're all on your holidays this year, you might notice some limpets, which is the picture there on the left-hand side of your screen. These are beautiful shellfish that are common on our rocky shores, so you might notice those as you're on your holidays. These guys survive for 20 years by clinging to the rocks in exactly the same footprint, with like waves, coming down on their head, the equivalent of like a double-decker bus, but they cling on and they survive. And you can see the marks left on the rock, so keep an eye out for those during your summer. And over on the right-hand side, I have a periwinkle. Now, a periwinkle is also an extremely strong shape, one of the strongest in nature as well. They live in exactly the same habitat as your limpet. However, they survive differently because these guys, they roll with the waves. So it's the same harsh conditions. A storm comes in, or they're moved from post to pillar, but when conditions are calm, they emerge and they learn to adapt to their new environment. So I suppose, what is she telling us about this for? Well, basically, when I started my innovation journey, I was kind of a limpet myself, you might say, very stuck to doing projects the same old way. Basically, we had a lot of challenges for our seafood sector that were starting to affect our work. Our markets were becoming extremely volatile. Brexit was on the horizon. And we felt, lads, if we keep doing things the same way and just clinging on to, the usual way of doing things, our industry is going to suffer. So at that point, I suppose we figured out quickly that, we needed to start adapting and changing ourselves to what was going on in our environment. Charlie, I think you're rolling on my slides, are you? Maybe you could just roll on to the next one, please, because I think this is when the journey sort of started for me, because we needed both myself and my team needed to sort of change our mindset as to how we did projects. So we needed use the 3-lens approach to our projects rather than the way we were before. We were very much single lensed, let's say. So the 3-lens approach sort of enabled us to look at our projects differently. In the past, we would have been great on feasibility. So is it doable? We weren't great on desirability, which was who was our customer and, who actually would find this of any value. And we were absolutely useless at the money side of things, as looking at the commercial side. We didn't have that skill set in our team at all. And anyone that's familiar with the 3-lens approach knows that successful innovation happens at the intersection of these 3 lenses. So while we were fantastic at feasibility, we were great at buying new machines for fish processors. Fantastic. We knew every machine supplier globally, but we had, made no major links to our customer base, and we had very few financial, skill set in our team. So we quickly realized, we need to take this 3-lens approach and try and, change what we were doing. So if you could roll it on there, Charlie. So I suppose to start this process, we started by simply defining, well, what was innovation for our service? And after, getting together with the team, we quickly figured out that, well, we needed to offer value to our client base. And our client base was mainly, let's say, fish processors, so located all around the coast of Ireland. And we thought, well, how can we add value to them? And we figured out that we could do it in 2 different ways. We could do it by helping them reduce the cost of their goods and services, so bringing new technologies, making them more efficient. And we could also help them to increase their value of their fish when they sell it by adding value. So for example, putting it in a skin pack or increasing the shelf life and stuff like that. And from doing these innovations, we knew that it would help them financially, and therefore it would help their companies become stronger and more resilient. So I think that was our first point, was just define what is innovation. I think anyone working in the public sector, and I'm still in the public sector now, and I'm kind of working in a totally different environment, so I'm really becoming a periwinkle. It's like, I'm looking at how inefficient processes can be, and how much time is wasted, looking at grant aid, processes and that kind of thing. I know when we did this in BIM and we looked at how we could improve our process, we reduced our grant aid process from a typical 12 hours, was like about how long it took to process a grant. And by bringing in some new efficiencies, we actually reduced that to 1.5 hours. So that's just an example of how you might define it in a service. So I suppose that leads me on then as to, okay, now we knew we needed the mindset. Then now we know what kind of innovation we're going to be working with. So I suppose then we had to think about, well, how are we actually going to do it? So Charlie, you might roll it there, please. We basically kind of needed to think about how we could apply this 3-lens approach to our work. So we basically started using some simple tools. And one of the most useful tools, and it is literally my bedrock, was the BMC, the Business Model Canvas. And I would encourage anyone, I left the website there, it's all free and it's all online. So it basically, this tool kind of enabled us to take a deeper dive into the different areas of the project. It helped to kind of structure our thinking into different buckets. So, we were great at feasibility, like I said. We weren't great at desirability, but this tool helped us and challenged us to think about the customer. And then viability, well, we developed that skill in-house. So we were able to, separate our thinking into these buckets to make sure we had something that was doable. We had a customer that actually wanted this and that it was financially viable. So you can actually apply this tool to a service as well. And it really does help to structure your team, to structure your thinking. And like at the start of a project, you pull this out and you haven't a clue, like it's like 9 smart guesses. You just have a guess. But as you move through the project, you know, you're starting to validate the feasibility, you're starting to validate the customers. Yes, we know they still want this, and you're validating the figures. So at the start, the figures might be literally on the back of an envelope, but by the end, you might have some basic financial tools that you might be really putting, you know, some hard facts behind it. So basically, by applying this method, you know, we were just taking a deeper dive into our 3 lenses. Now, we used other tools as well, but I didn't want to bombard you guys with tools today. But if I could pick one, that's the one. So this helped us kind of develop a framework then of how we did our projects. If you want to roll on to the next one, Charlie. So I thought, well, what will we do next? So the next thing I did was I basically wrote the manual on how to do innovation projects. Because now that we were getting used to sort of using tools, we were doing things differently. You can see here in the picture, we were workshopping rather than sitting around the boardroom table. You know, we bought some of those fancy glass boards and Post-its and stuff like that. And, you know, we got people out of their normal sort of, you know, comfort zone. And we just did things slightly differently. So I compiled all of those tools and how we did innovation projects, but it's the same for everyone really. And I put it into my 3 lenses of innovation book, which I have here, and it's available to everybody. So if you go onto the BIM website and just Google it, you'll find it. And this has got 39 tools, and it explains how to take an idea or something completely daft, and it takes it from there, and how you validate and how you move it through a framework and take it all the way up through piloting and, you know, concept development, all the way to piloting and scaling eventually, and, you know, launching. So I hope you might find that useful. So that's got 39 tools, so, but all of them won't be useful for you. You just pick the ones that work for you and go with that. So Charlie, on to my next slide there. So I suppose my main message is today to think about that limpet and think about the periwinkle and the way that these guys can you know, roll with the waves. You know, they can basically, you know, adapt to whatever is happening in their environment. And I think that's kind of the message I want to bring. Don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to try something different. And I would say just go with it and roll with the waves, and the best of luck to everybody. And again, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I think I'm handing over to Owen, is it? Alan? Sorry, Alan. Thanks.
Hello folks, I'm going to unmute, so if everyone can hear me, give us a thumbs up there. Okay, and now I'm going to start sharing and share Keynote. And now, can everybody see my screen?
Yep, just need to press play, I think.
Grand, yeah. There we go.
Perfect.
So hi folks, and thanks for giving up a bit of your lunchtime, a bit of your Friday. The weather's not great in Dublin anyway, so you probably weren't going outside for a stroll at lunch. So this is educational, and hopefully it'll help you. This is me, Alan Doherty. I'm the head of innovation design in Cities Innovation Lab in Dublin. That's what I used to look like before a year of lockdown, when I was able to still stand in front of large-scale whiteboards and put post-its on them, and also when I was still shaving my chin. My role involves a lot of design thinking, particularly in the area of client engagement for some of our very large corporate clients in the banking business in Dublin. So some of our local clients would include the likes of the Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of the big guys there. And we engage them a lot through the process of innovation. It's a great conversation to be having with them, apart from the sales conversation, the client service conversation. To engage them in the innovation conversation has been kind of pivotal for the growth of some of the relationships. So my background is in design and digital design, and a little bit of exposure to the startup world as well. And I suppose, like almost anybody on the call, I have an increasing focus on sustainability, just both as a personal thing, and the role contains a lot more elements of ESG and sustainability focus, and I think is going to be the new normal. A little bit about the Citibank context, and this isn't so much to kind of blow Citi's trumpet as to sort of say, look, Citi is a large, global, complex organization with very strong public sector ties, and the fact that we're a bank, the fact that we're a private enterprise and a publicly quoted company doesn't necessarily mean that we don't face similar challenges to folks in the public sector. We have a lot of public sector client relationships, and we are that sort of scale of bank, particularly in the area of cross-border payments, where we have a lot of government bodies and public sector organizations across like 126 different countries who rely on us for things like pension payments and tax collections. So, you know, we're very, very embedded within the public sector in all of the jurisdictions we operate on. Citi, for those reasons, would be organizationally very slow to change and resistant to innovation. Now, I say organizationally to distinguish it from individually. So, you know, there are a lot of very progressive, very go-ahead individuals who are all in favor of innovation. But the organization, the scale that it operates at, the fact that it's a regulated entity, and the fact that we do things like public sector business means that there are certain kind of natural breaks on innovation. So it doesn't happen as smoothly as you might particularly like when you work in the innovation function. So sometimes it is very tough to be patient with it and very tough to be resilient enough to see projects through, which are very complex. But then, you know, the payoff for that is, you know, innovating in social media, innovating in sort of gaming or whatever. Those sectors might be very interesting and very fast and very almost fashionable in terms of how they change with trends, whereas the satisfaction of making significant change at a very, very large scale in a huge organization is that, you know, you've actually definitely made an impact, even though it might have taken a long time. We're not a startup, and we're not particularly agile, and we're not disruptive. We're a 200-year-old bank. And the last time Wall Street banks got involved in disrupting anything, 2008 happened, and there was a global financial crisis. So there's very strong institutional resistance to banks disrupting stuff. This kind of move fast and break things is fine, but when you're talking about breaking pension payments, not so much. We're trying to be more so, or we're trying to take on a lot of the good values and good aspects of startup culture in Silicon Valley and venture capital, all these things that make companies very flexible and very effective in achieving their goals quickly. But, you know, within the context of a regulated framework where we've got to be really, really cautious, we can't break stuff, and, you know, we have a lot of stakeholders that we have to satisfy. Apart from anything else, you know, anything that we do from the software perspective, so a lot of what we do is with software because that's our entire medium of exchange for the financial bits and for the user experience bits. You know, when you think of the rollout involved in making a change to something which supports something like 160 currencies, 120 countries with different languages, different regulatory entities, you know, it's very, very complex. So it's a very long-term undertaking to make change. Now, as a global organization, it's kind of interesting that we are located very, very strongly in Dublin. We've got a mature innovation lab network. It's been going for about 10 plus years, and Dublin was the very first one. It's kind of interesting that it was set up in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, where they just needed a kind of a fresh start. And, you know, the IFSC and some of the state bodies were very instrumental in bringing the innovation function, the research and development function to Dublin, due to, you know, favorable tax environment for research and development work. And also that kind of bridging function between, you know, US, Europe, and the rest of the world. We have a very complicated relationship with the core organization, and this is something that I think will be reflected in you know, your innovation roles and your innovation engagement with the rest of the public service. For example, you know, if you're sitting apart from the organization, then you're probably going to bring innovations back that are sort of pretty much cooked. We've got this great thing that we want you to do. We've developed over here in the innovation lab. If you haven't brought your stakeholders along with you, then you get what we have termed in our lab organ rejection. Where you try and graft something on that doesn't necessarily belong to the core of the organization. On the other hand, if you are like an order taker, and if you're just literally doing innovation to suit normal organizational agendas, then it's not really innovating. You're not challenging enough and you're not pushing enough. So, what we found over the period of time, the lab's been going for over 10 years. I've been there for about 7 of those. It's a constant kind of re-engaging and rechecking the balance between challenging and collaborating. So you've got to collaborate with your stakeholders. You've got to be clear on what they're getting out of the innovation conversation. But you've also kind of got to challenge and provoke and advocate for progress and for change. So, those two things it's a constantly moving picture. Because of that, we sort of have this evolving mandate, which we refer to as the enable and the execute. So, we enable innovation and we execute innovation. And what that means is that we do have projects that we take on ourselves. So there's an innovation project in data science or in payments or in cryptocurrency. So we've got to execute that. And we have the expertise, both design thinking and workshop facilitation, prototyping, but also technical expertise in the lab. So people like data scientists and rapid prototyping experts. But also then we second expertise into the lab from the core organization. So if we're doing a trade finance project, for example, we would take people in from the trade finance function for a period of time to provide the in-depth knowledge for that subject matter area. And we execute projects as in we turn in a proof of concept or a prototype or a minimum viable product and give that to the organization to develop. But the other side of things is that we also enable innovation to happen. So we have an advocacy and a learning and development and a training sort of a role as well. And that can be explicit, where we literally sit down and give trainings to people. It can also be sort of implicit, where there are projects where we take on secondees on the basis that they're not necessarily needed for the project, but it's to give them exposure to the thought processes and some of the tools. And I heartily recommend sort of things like Alien's Manual with the 37 different types of tools and techniques and processes for innovation. I've actually seen it's a really good primer. And to give people in the organization that exposure. Now, the problem with your stakeholders is when the waters get muddied between enabling and executing, and you kind of go, okay, if we're expected to deliver, we can't necessarily be expected to also educate. If we're expected to enable, then bringing a bunch of people in and walking them through the design sprint process isn't necessarily the same day that you're going to, out of the back of that training process, you might generate winning ideas. So you've got to be sure what are you focusing on in particular for that. If you're enabling the organization, if you're sharing your expertise in, that's great, but you're not going to necessarily be launching new products and services on the back of that. And on the other hand, if you're trying really, really hard to execute to a very hard deadline and with serious budget, you don't necessarily want to be taking the foot off the accelerator to just bring people up to speed. Sometimes you just got to kind of forge on ahead. So those are kind of some of the sort of the tensions that you need to navigate with making change in large organizations. And it's a bit like the weather, it's a bit like the tides. Sometimes somebody will come in, and we seem to spend a period of months just doing the enabling, which makes people get frustrated in their roles because they want to be executing. There are other periods where we just execute, and kind of we forget sometimes that the rest of the organization necessarily isn't following along, and we have to take time out to then go back and educate and explain to people a little bit more. So just that's a longer term view maybe than just on a project basis or on a particular product stream basis. Now on that, for the folks on the call, for the takeaways for individuals, how do you work in a particular role like that? How do you succeed? If you look at the diagram, there's sort of the inspiring and the ideation and the implementation. There's a spectrum of work along there. Now, the inspiration, there won't be any shortage of that. Some of it spontaneously comes up from your organization through, suggestion boxes or whatever. Some of it you won't need inspiration. You'll be told what is you're supposed to be working on. You'll get handed down something and we're stuck. There's lots of inspiration floating around, for example, for things like the Sustainable Development Goals. People being inspired to look at better, more efficient, sustainable ways of doing things. So, I think there's never any shortage of ideas either. But along that spectrum from ideation to implementation, from the spark of an initial idea of wouldn't it be great if we did X, to that being implemented. I mean, an idea is an idea, but an innovation is an idea put into practice. So the implementation bit has to happen for it to be an innovation. Innovation is a change that's materially made in the world. It's manifested out in the real world. So just having the idea and leaving it in a drawer or on a whiteboard isn't enough. It has to be implemented. And in a large complex organization, that's a spectrum of, from the initial spark of ideation, that often comes from people who are change makers. They're impatient, they're different thinkers, they're a little bit, quirky. They see things differently, and they want to bring the different lens to a problem and look at it in a way that hasn't been looked at before. Those folks are not necessarily always the best at implementation, because implementation at scale in large organizations requires a lot of diplomacy, a lot of stakeholder management, a lot of empathy with people who are probably going to be disrupted. If your ideation is big enough, if it's ambitious enough, then you're probably going to ruffle quite a lot of feathers. So to bring folks with you requires diplomacy, and it requires, a different set of skills. So, to succeed in innovation, I think you've got to figure out what your strengths are. Are you an individual who is just, head down, wants to make change, has a bunch of, ideas that you want to bring into the world, but you just want to work on those? Or are you more a person who is a facilitator and an enabler and an ambassador and a networker and a catalyst? And there are a ton of kind of support functions that help bring really good raw ideas into the world. And that's why any of this innovation stuff it's a team sport, and it is a marathon, not a sprint. If you're working for, a really fast social media startup in Silicon Valley, then great, knock yourself out, come up with 100 ideas a day and just fire them all out there into the world. But, in public sector and a modern city and large enterprises, regulated entities, you're going to require patience and resilience. You're going to have people telling you that you're nuts and stuff will never work. That becomes kind of part of the job, that you've got to be able to deal with the challenges and not take them personally. But it always helps if you're an individual ideator and you want to be a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk in your role. You're going to need other people around you to support and sponsor and unruffle the feathers that you're probably going to ruffle if your idea is big enough. And on the other hand, if you are someone who sees themselves more as an orchestrator or a facilitator, then seek out those kind of malcontents and rebels and people who don't necessarily, they're square pegs and round holes sometimes in every organization. Maybe kind of nurture those a little bit, nurture some of the people that come up with things that are a little bit more left field, because you need those as well, because they'll be the people when somebody's pointing to say, well, we didn't really do anything different, did we? Maybe those are the people that you might give an extra listen to, or go for a cup of coffee or whatever to do a little bit of soft networking and make sure that they're being heard and that their idea gets a little bit more traction. It doesn't just literally get shot down at the first meeting. So that's pretty much my tuppence worth. I'm trying to gauge from Vinny whether we have time for questions or whatever, but I think I need to hand over to Owen now for the next bit, and we can maybe get some questions to the end.
We might just hang on till the end, Alan, if that's okay.
The notes.
If you just want to press play on the slides, Owen. And then, the display settings again.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks for that, Vinny. So listen, folks, we've taken a little over half an hour of your time talking about 3 stories, and I'm going to tell the last story. There are only 3, 4 examples. We're not exemplars. Essentially, we're saying, folks, if we can do it, us quirky people, then surely you can do it. And hopefully you see something in each of our stories that you can relate to, or you can maybe say, hey, or I'm going to 3 person from the field, from experts. Very quick. through. And the third story, they feel very much innovators doing innovating as we should be and looking far off into the future. Then
Owen, I think we might be just losing your audio a small bit, so I might try and share your slides.
Do you want me to keep talking, Vinny, or do you want me to wait?
If you wouldn't mind, just stop. I'll try share your slides here, and we'll see if it's just your audio isn't coming through clearly.
Yeah, slide 3, please, Vin. Yeah. And on to the next one. That's
Okay.
it. Okay, so now we're looking at a 30-year story in 2 minutes, really. But if we look at what Charlie said about what the network is doing, Innovate Ireland, we talk about practitioners, advocates, and explorers. So I'm just simply reversing this because my experience was the exact opposite. If you're looking to put me in a box, well, I'm sure you could put me in circle. One of them is, yeah, Curious George, that's me. And yeah, I'm generally eating a banana too, so it fits. But I'm not a creative guy. But what I do bring to the table, always have, is curiosity. Every now and then a burst of humility, although some people will argue with that. But that's what I brought to the table, the personality. And I brought that to when I started into the workforce. I always wanted to be innovating. I was always interested in the new thing, whatever that was. If you have that interest, going to what Alan said, that's how you will develop as an innovation professional. Then I realized, of course, that as to Charlie's story, of course, you don't bring people with you unless you can sell the change. So I had to learn to work at scale, at different scales. First, me in a small team, then me across a whole site, 100 people, then working with a company across 9 sites, 700 people, on to working for an international corporation, 12,000 people, and finally doing work that was Europe-wide, sector-wide, that was being used by hundreds of thousands of people. So you have no choice. It doesn't matter how clever you are, you're not going to know it all. But if you stick with it, the stubbornness, which is a little bit of the limpet, Aileen, but you definitely need the periwinkle too. You will get there. No matter what you have or don't have, the best way is just to start and to explore. And then you'll get through the advocacy and you will become at least a practitioner and an expert. Now, if we consider my particular version or flavor of the story, well, science, psychology, that was a background, and systems. Another box you can definitely put me in, I'm a systems guy, always have been. The advantage of that for innovation is I'm not interested in the theater. I'm not interested in the one-off event. There are cool things happening in one-off events, but I'm interested in making things happen on a long scale, sustained performance, sustained value, sustained impact, or as we might say in the public service, delivery on our mission. That's the approach I take. And as we've heard from the other people today, lots of different approaches can work, and they work best when they work together, diversity and inclusion, of course. So on top of the expertise that I brought from science of psychology and from working on systems, I also learned domains. So I was head of various functions, quality assurance, regulatory risk, procurement, HR, around commercial businesses, around operation sides businesses. That all adds up. And it does mean after a while, after all the mistakes you make, you've got enough experience to make things happen that need to happen. So then I decided in 2013 to specialize in innovation, and I realized I was missing something. I needed that innovation piece, a specific specialized innovation piece. But the last thing I wanted to do was to go back and do a master's. My humble opinion, I've done about 10 of them, but university don't agree with me. So I went and I got a black belt accreditation in innovation management systems and innovation management. So that tied together a lot of my experience, validated a lot of what I thought was doing, connected the methodologies of Six Sigma and Lean and procurement and project management, and gave me the confidence to say, yep, actually what you've been learning for 25 years, that will stand. That does accord with what people are saying in the world, what the experts are saying, best current practice as it develops. Great to have that confidence. That in 30 years and you're ready to go. Nothing to it really. Okay. So did we produce any successes? Well, yeah, I can look at my babies. I can look at new products like introducing Dyson to Ireland. I can look at new teams. I can look at new business units. I can look at tripling the revenue of a company I work for. I can look at doubling the size of a client that I'm working at currently. And I can say, yeah, that didn't happen because you're clever. That happened because you're lucky and you're working with good people and you've seen enough things that you can stitch these together. And you find other people who are creative and other people who are better at the technical side. And you make sure that you can work with them and that they want to work with you. Then you'll get results coming out the other side. I would have to report, however, and Charlie touched on this, that for the first 20 years that I did this innovation work, it was rare that the organization credited innovation. It was rare that the organization got better from one innovation to the next. It was rare that they got the results in the 1 year that they should have, and often not in the first 5 years, although eventually they did. You really need the discipline. You need to have learned your chops, to have practiced the techniques, as Aileen emphasizes, to start getting that kind of result. Easy to say now. One baby I'm particularly proud of is down on the bottom right-hand side of that slide. I authored a standard. So I authored a standard because the company I worked for was failing in its markets. Very successful in a couple, but just failing in 2 or 3 others. We needed to speak the language of our customers. So we figured out what that language was, and we wrote a standard for our industry. And that became a European norm, and that became the basis of certification that all 30 countries in CEN and all EU countries apply. So that is still a platform now for companies to innovate 20 years after we produced the first version of it. Cool thing to be involved in, and links with what we're going to talk about in the next slide in terms of Innovate Ireland, Public Service Innovation Network, and the future story. So very quickly, the next slide there, Benny. 2 stories. One, our networks, really short and simple and sweet story. Our first contact with the Public Service Innovation Network was March. We called up because we realized that, if we think you're fellow travelers, we think we're doing the same sort of thing. Let's see. And Breda and Vinny were very receptive, very welcoming. They said, how can we collaborate together? They said, well, we were wondering about this question of what's a good job description? We said, okay, well, we've got one of those because we're working on a body of knowledge for the innovation profession. So we shared that job description with Breda and with Vinny. And then we talked about, well, what would be next? We said, okay, let's collaborate on a day like today and let's put out some content. What content? We said, well, why don't we just tell those stories? Why don't we just show people what it means to be an innovation professional? We're not being comprehensive. We're just showing some examples and perspectives. Hopefully that sparks conversation, maybe today, or maybe really for after today. If the shoe fits, by all means, we'd love you all to join us in our network in Innovate Ireland. And we absolutely expect to continue helping and collaborating with the Public Service Innovation Network. So that's the first story. The second story is a future story. What should our innovation profession look like? Well, bluntly, it won't just have one route. And even just from the 4 of us today, you're seeing markedly different routes. But there is a future coming at us, a potential future. How it develops, exactly what it looks like, the Irish flavor remains to be seen. But if we think of ISO, International Standards Organization, OECD, EU, and when that applies through the EU, the Horizon 2020 and Ireland Ops, our Public Service 2020, you've got this perspective of ensuring sustainable innovation capability throughout public service. And with that as a background, we have a model to follow, and we're working directly on putting this model in place in Ireland. We're doing it with bodies of state, such as the NSAI and Enterprise Ireland, and with our colleagues in the network and in academia. And down at the bottom of that slide, the nice purple images are care of a friend in Sweden, Magnus Carlsson, who works for the Swedish Institute of Standards, among other parties. And this model is being developed in Sweden, in Japan, in Canada, by us, and also by ISPIM, the International Society of Innovation Professionals. So there's a lot of weight behind this. We can see this coming. We know that this is going to happen. Let's just see how well it can work. Let's see how we can make this work in Ireland. And our invitation to you, apart from maybe coming to join us in the network, is let's go and make that model. Let's put that together for Ireland, for public and private, and any innovation explorers, practitioners, or advocates. So, next one, Vinny. Totally coincidentally, Magnus's colleague Ingrid gave this talk with this slide as the title slide yesterday at ISPIM's annual conference. Now that was total serendipity. We weren't looking for that. We didn't know it was happening. But this is playing out right now. Italy and Spain are working on this model, although I haven't connected with them directly. But this is playing out across the globe and accelerating as we speak. Next one, Vinny. So we're done telling our stories. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I've included here a quote from one of our members, Carmel, who is head of information systems in Monaghan County Council. So we're not a bunch of either academics or hard-headed money-making consultants, although there are a few of those categories and some other categories, and some just plain quirky people, as Alan indicated. But we share those stories and experiences like we do today every week. We work on that body of knowledge every week. We're developing standards in the capability of our network members every week. So we're fairly confident, and we really look forward to working with the Public Service Innovation Network to do more of that in times to come. Vinny, thank you very much for hosting, and back to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Owen. I am keen to get through a few questions. I know we mightn't be able to get to all of them, but I might have one that's kind of broad enough, say, that will cover everyone. And as you can see from the four stories that have been shared today, there's a vast catalog of different stories, different experiences. Some people may have fallen into this role. Some people it naturally lended itself to this role. So to bring it back to the innovation professional, so for the person that has now been landed with innovation in their title, and if you could think about maybe say so maybe from your own experiences, were you dealing with limpets or was it periwinkles? Like are you dealing with the kind of the rock hard people, or is there people that are kind of willing to come with you on the journey? So kind of like how did in each, say, have you any examples of some of the quick wins you would have gotten as you got the role? Okay, and now I'm in charge of innovation for this. What is a good starting point or launching pad for me to kind of get people on board? I know, say, maybe we might have the hindsight of Aileen's playbook now, but obviously people have it, of course, to their disposal. But say, what would be, say, something that you would do to kind of get people behind you and get a bit of momentum going in this new role? I might start with Charlie.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. The first thing is you said some people will be enthusiastic. Find them, nurture them, and keep them with you, because you're going to find a number of limpets along the way, and it may be compliance, risk, it may be IT, it may be this, that, and the other, and they will be trying to put brick walls up. And if you have, the more allies you have, the more you realize actually this is worth doing, and people believe in this, and that'll give you the strength of character, maybe some tactics to approach the brick walls and start to knock them down. So yeah, find the allies, stick with them, support them, and get help, I guess.
If I could, one comment, it's a build, I hope. Crawl, walk, run. Your initial victory should be small. I can remember once agreeing to put a Burco, a boiler, in the staff canteen. What had that got to do with innovation? The answer is it engaged the people on the site in the idea of innovation. And we really quickly built from Burcos, boilers and canteens, to things that made real differences to our customers or to our future potential customers, because people were accelerating them with us.
Amazing. Aileen?
Yeah, I completely agree with the guys. I think find those people who are a little bit like-minded to begin with, and hopefully that will grow over time. And you know, when the people who are going to be a bit resistant to doing, you know, things a little bit differently, we were a small team. We did meet with resistance, but I wouldn't push it on people. I would almost just let them see what's happening out in the other room, and eventually, you know, they will come. They will come because they may be resistant for different reasons. They may just be shy. They may not want to come forth with ideas, but there's lots of ways to skin a cat. So I would just say just stick with it, because you're going to have hard days, but it's worth it because the good days will come as well.
Excellent. Alan?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that the last thing that Aileen said around that you're going to have tough days. I mean, if you're doing an innovation role correctly, and I appreciate, you know, I have a full-time innovation job title. That's what I do, especially for people that are doing it as a job plus, and you know, they're trying to juggle a whole bunch of other priorities and deadlines with it. You know, you're going to need a lot of resilience. You're going to need to kind of take a deep breath, and you're going to maybe need to feel supported. There are lots of people that will make you feel exposed and you know, tell you that your idea is crazy, it's never going to work, or it's going to take too much effort to do. You know, so if you can find supporters and kind of cultivate your sponsors and cherish them, people that are kind of encouraging to you, you're going to need to fall back on them more often than you think, maybe, if you're actually trying to make real change. If you're anything that makes real change annoys people, threatens people, disrupts people, you know, that's seen as kind of your role as an innovator. But you know, that can take its toll as well. So even when it's your full-time job, if it's your part-time job, double the challenge, I think, you know.
Amazing. And I suppose this will probably be the last chance that I'll get to talk to 4 people that have been so instrumental in setting up another network as well. And one of the biggest difficulties for us is to actually manage the success of a network. As you're all probably aware, a lot of things can happen in the background or in the fringes of the network that can be very hard to measure, but still are as important as possibly the content that's being delivered through the network events or however you meet. So I would love to hear possibly, maybe not necessarily how you manage the success of your network, but maybe to speak of some of the more positive things that you've gotten from being part of maybe this network or other networks like it.
I'm going to just come straight in there on the back of it and sort of say that sense of talking to other people who've been through the same stuff. It's a really odd job. It's a really strange sensation sometimes to be doing this, to be going into people, you know, and just really getting a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance. And I think, you know, it can be tough as well to just stand in front of that and be the focus for a lot of stress, a lot of tension around change. So for me, number one, as Charlie's presentation alluded, you know, it grew out of finding somebody else in a counterpart in another role who just was feeling it. I mean, Charlie and myself came out of the same workshops when he was a client, and you know, we would both be kind of, how did that go for you, sort of stuff. It's enormously helpful, and that's what the organization has done for me. So an attempt to kind of replicate those conversations as colleagues in unfortunately under lockdown conditions. So we haven't had not half as much beer and pizza as we had intended when we started thinking about this in the beginning, but sure, that will pass as well, hopefully.
Anyone else want to jump in finally?
Same, Vinny. War stories and the chance to come up with challenges as much as solutions.
I would agree. It's when I started, I felt I was alone in the world doing this. I didn't realize, you know, there was lots of other people doing it, and just by reaching out and engaging with different networks has been absolutely phenomenal. So having been invited to be part of this group, I just jumped at it, really. So it's been fantastic, and I would encourage anyone to just jump on board. You know, there's no commitment. You just have to jump in if you have a question anytime or you want to discuss something. Amazing how the same problems go across so many different places, and you might just find an answer. So thanks.
And there are tens of thousands of books on innovation on Amazon, but none of them really tell you how to do it and how to they teach you a technique or you know, a tactic, if you like, but there's very few. There's nothing that I found. There's no manual that you can buy that will say, how do you get going in an innovation role? It just doesn't exist. So for me, it's as everyone else has kind of indicated, it's having the ability to have a group of people that we grow to trust, to be able to say, I tried to do this, I couldn't get it to work. What the hell am I doing wrong? And without judgment, because they've all been through it, they would kind of say, well, this worked for me. I heard somebody tried this and it was a disaster, but then they did this and it worked. So it's the shared experience is really where the value comes from, and being able to tap into that in an open and honest manner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And as I suppose as I come towards the end of this 2-year experience, and we haven't quite nailed that we have that open kind of safe environment that people can share, because I know these conversations are happening offline, but it's trying to get them. It's harder to get them going online to get people to kind of pull down their guard and say, look, no, actually I'm having a problem with this issue. Can anyone help? Because there's probably multiples of people in the same situation or have gone through it already. I suppose it's just coming up, and it is just after 2, and I know people will probably have to drop off for meetings at 2. So I just want to share this slide as I'm going through the kind of final wrap up, if that's okay. So yeah, a massive thanks to our guest speakers today, Charlie, Aileen, Alan and Owen from Innovate Ireland for sharing their experiences and their stories today. It does take a certain brave soul to come out and share their experiences, and it's from those experiences that we learn. So I do hope that everyone on the call today was able to glean some nuggets from their stories and hopefully take them back to their own organizations to roll out. There will be a Innovate Ireland link sent out to you later with a network recap, or alternatively you can visit the website on screen today. I just want to remind people that our next meeting will be on the 8th of July. We'll have speakers from Offaly County Council, the Court Service and the Organisational Development Office in the HSE. So details will be sent out of that with the network recap. And then finally, just to let you know that this week we did launch the Future Tech Challenge, where we'll see 3 prizes of work, materials and products been offered by Amazon, Cisco and IBM in 3 categories of cloud technology, remote connectivity and artificial intelligence. So we're hoping to have an information session on that as well in early July. So please keep an eye out in your email box for that. And if you do want to learn more on that, if you visit ops.gov.ie /Future Tech Challenge. And finally, just thanks so much for everyone for logging in. I hope you were able to take something from it, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.